Welcome to now, right? As you may have noticed, right, those last two videos, the ones that we looked at about Sartre and existentialism, were recorded last year, right? I like those two. What followed, I didn't love. And so this is one of those cases where, I'm sort of blending the old and the new, right? What worked well, what didn't work so well. And really the next point that we have is really talking through are there differences between what, Kierkegaard wants, what Sartre wants us to know about existentialism? Are there positives, negatives? How do we really get through talking about what they have in common, what they have that's different, and what it does for us, right? What are we talking about? Well, if we're talking about existentialism in France, clearly we're more looking at what Sartre is doing, right? And to be honest, his form of existentialism, this atheistic, non-theistic form of existentialism, is the one that has stuck around the most, right? And for many reasons, right? One, in France, if the Catholic Church is powerful, it is not influential in a religious sense, but more in a cultural sense, right? The Catholic Church has, a lot of cultural ties to the people, the way that they think, the way that their vacations run, the way that their institutions sort of function, but it doesn't have a lot to do with the way that they feel connected or not spiritually, right? They are much more in Sartre's camp rather than this leap of faith, right? That Kierkegaard is talking about in really putting your faith into a higher power, right? For Sartre, that higher power, that leap of faith, is simply saying that you're going to continue making these decisions about responsibility for the rest of your lives, right? And that's where the despair shows up, right? We've talked about that a little bit in the last video, that we're going to be making decisions for the rest of our lives, deciding what we're going to eat for the rest of our lives, deciding, how to get dressed for the rest of our lives, deciding are we going to go to work for the rest of our lives, right? And that can be overwhelming, right? And so the leap of faith that Sartre really has us making, right, in this non-theistic existentialism, is the decision to continue doing it, right? To continue making that decision, to continue on, right? And also to, for lack of a better term, to trust that the decisions that we're making are the correct ones, right? Without any assurance, right? This is sort of the boldness that Sartre talks about, right? But what about bad faith? Because that is mentioned in existentialism, is a humanism. We talk about bad faith and what it means for us, and for what it means, Kierkegaard doesn't really have the same sort of concept, and so this is a purely Sartrean, existentialism thing. The idea of bad faith being the fact that you could get out of responsibilities somehow, right? That you could make a decision and pretend you were making it for you, while at the same time not really making it for you. The bad faith is this idea that you could sort of get away with stuff and sort of have everything and not feel responsible for it. Sartre calls those people les salauds. In English, we generally translate it as jerks, but for Sartre, the term is bastards, right? That we have bastardized, in a way, the process. We've turned it into an illegitimate process. When we do something because we just think we should probably do it, but we're not really committed to it, right? That is a decision made in bad faith. Sartre would look at a lot of the culturally Catholic things that go on in France and really call them kind of bad faith decisions, right? If you're doing something because, well, it's just the way things are and it's the way things should be done, that's bad faith, right? Thinking that you can just simply say, I don't need to really consider my decisions, right? In a way, that's the part that would tie us back to Kierkegaard, right? That Kierkegaard says to exist, you have to make decisions, commit to them, and and be conscious of your decision-making process, right? Sartre would agree with that 100%, right? That if you are making decisions without necessarily thinking about them, you're acting in bad faith, right? And that you still have to be responsible. You're still responsible for the decisions that you've made, but it's bad faith when you think back and can't really remember, why did I make that decision, right? And this also, right? Again, going to lead to a lot of despair on the part of a lot of people, right? Because how often do we actually consider what we're eating for breakfast, or it's just there, it's in the cupboard, and we're going to eat it, right? If we're at if we're at school, right, and we see a door, it's opened, we hold it for the person behind us, but we're not really considering whether or not it's a good thing to do it. We just do it because that's just what people are doing. Technically, is it bad faith? Yeah, I guess. Now, there are more serious things, right, that Sartre would say are really important to consider. Simply going along with a larger group project, right? For example, a political movement, a religious movement, because it's something that your family's always done, that's bad faith. Unless you own that decision, you will consistently be acting in bad faith because you're not really making that considered judgment, right? For Sartre, that's really important, this idea of making considered judgments. So, I want to wrap up in the next video by sort of talking about what we're going to be doing with this as we move forward into a book next week. The book is written not by Sartre, but by Camus. Camus is going to be the one we're going to be talking about when it comes to absurdism. So why are we looking at him first, and why are we looking at Sartre later on when we get to absurdism? Are the two interchangeable? We'll talk about it